Manchester Airport runs over 200 flights a day. Most people only ever look at Spain. That is a mistake, and it is costing you money. 12 places, real prices, real itineraries, and exactly when to book. Let us go. 1. Tirana, Albania. Ryanair and Wizz Air both fly Manchester to Tirana, and return fares regularly drop under £40 if you book on a Tuesday or Wednesday morning, which is when both airlines tend to release flash sales. The cheapest months are April, May, September, and October, right before and after the summer crowds hit the coast. A local beer in a neighborhood bar costs around £1.50. A full traditional meal, main course, salad and bread, runs about £5 to £10. Coffee is under £1 almost everywhere, and Tirana genuinely has one of the best coffee cultures in Europe. For things to see, start in Skanderbeg Square, then walk to the Bunk Art Museum, a converted Cold War bunker built by dictator Enver Hoxha. Entry costs about £6. Take the Dijkste Express cable car up the mountain overlooking the city for panoramic views, around £15 return. Use the app Bolt for taxis. It is far cheaper than flagging one down, and every driver in Tirana uses it. A full weekend, 2 nights, food, drinks and activities included, costs roughly £120 per person, not including flights. A single-day trip out to Peleș Castle just south of the city costs next to nothing if you grab a shared minibus called a furgon. Keep an eye out for Tirana Jazz Festival. If you are visiting in autumn, it fills the city's bars with live music most nights for free. 2. Kraków, Poland. Ryanair flies Manchester to Kraków multiple times a week, and fares under £30 return are common if you book 6 to 8 weeks ahead, especially for midweek departures. January and February are the cheapest months to fly, though summer gives you the best weather and the most going on. A pint of local beer in the Kazimierz district costs around £2.50. A full meal at a milk bar, the old communist-era cafeteria-style diners that still serve some of the best value food in the city, costs around £4 to £5. Visit the main market square, walk through the cloth hall, then head into Kazimierz, the old Jewish quarter, now full of bars and street food. Wawel Castle entry is cheap and worth it. Auschwitz-Birkenau is an hour away and books out weeks in advance, so reserve that the moment you land in the country, not the day before. Use the Jakto JD app for public transport tickets straight from your phone. The money-saving trick here is simple. Eat where the locals eat rather than on the main square. Prices drop by half just 2 streets away. A full weekend costs around £100 per person, including food, drinks, and transport. Look out for Juvenalia in May, a massive student festival that fills the city's parks with free outdoor concerts. 3. Porto, Portugal. Ryanair and EasyJet both fly Manchester to Porto, and return fares under £50 show up regularly if you book for a Tuesday or Wednesday flight in the shoulder months of March, April, October, or November. A local beer costs around £1 in a supermarket or £2 to £3 in a bar. A Prato do Dia, the set lunch of the day, gets you a full meal, a drink, and coffee for around £10. Walk across the Dom Luis Bridge for free panoramic views. Visit the Livraria Lello bookstore and take a boat cruise along the Douro River for around £13. Try a francesinha, Porto's famous layered sandwich smothered in sauce, for around £9. Use the Porto public bus route 500 as a cheap coastal tour out to Foz do Douro instead of paying for a tourist bus. A weekend here, food, drinks, and a couple of paid attractions costs around £90 per person. A day trip to Guimarães, considered the birthplace of Portugal, costs about £18 including the train and entry to the castle. If your dates line up with June, the São João festival takes over the entire city with street parties, fireworks, and people hitting each other on the head with plastic hammers. It is genuinely one of the best free events in Europe, though hotel prices roughly double that weekend, so book early or avoid it if budget matters more than atmosphere. 4. Sofia, Bulgaria. Wizz Air flies Manchester to Sofia, and fares under £40 return are common outside July and August. Booking around 2 months ahead on a midweek date gets the best price. A draft beer costs around £2. A full sit-down meal costs £8 to £12. Visit the Alexander Nevsky Cathedral, walk through Vitosha Boulevard, and take the free walking tour that departs daily from the National Palace of Culture. Tip-based, £10 is standard. Sofia sits right beneath Vitosha Mountain, and you can take a bus up for hiking or, in winter, skiing, all within city limits, which almost no other European capital can offer. Use the Move It app to navigate the tram and metro system. Tickets cost under £1 each. The money-saving trick is to eat at a mahana, a traditional Bulgarian tavern, rather than anywhere near the cathedral, where prices triple triple for tourists. A full weekend costs around £80 per person. A day trip to the Bojana Church or Rila Monastery, one of Bulgaria's most important religious sites, costs around £15 by organized minibus. Sofia's annual beer fest in early summer is worth timing your trip around if you like festivals. It is free to enter and the drinks are cheap even by Sofia standards. 5. Bucharest, Romania. Wizz Air runs regular flights from Manchester to Bucharest, with return fares often under £45 if booked for a Tuesday or Wednesday departure in the cheaper months of February, March, or November. A beer in a local bar costs around £2, and a full meal at a traditional restaurant runs £8 to £12. Walk through the Old Town. Visit the Palace of the Parliament, the second largest administrative building on Earth. Tours start around £8, and take a stroll through Heristro Park by the lake. Use the Bolt app here too. Taxis are cheap, but agreeing a fare or using the app avoids overcharging. A weekend runs around £85 per person, including food and a couple of paid attractions. A day trip out to Peleș Castle, one of the most photographed castles in Europe, costs around £20 by train and entry fee combined. If your trip lines up with December, Bucharest's Christmas markets are some of the most affordable and least crowded in Europe compared to the likes of Prague or Vienna. 6. Prague, Czech Republic. Ryanair and EasyJet both connect Manchester to Prague, and fares under £50 return appear regularly if you book for midweek travel outside the peak summer months. A pint of Czech beer, some of the cheapest and best quality in Europe, costs around £1.50 in a local pub. A full meal at a traditional restaurant costs £8 to £10. Walk across Charles Bridge early in the morning before the crowds arrive, visit Prague Castle, and wander the Old Town Square beneath the astronomical clock. Use the Litachka app for public transport tickets. The money-saving trick is to avoid restaurants directly on Old Town Square, where a beer can cost triple what you would pay 2 streets over. A weekend costs around £100 per person. A day trip to the medieval town of Kutna Hora, home to the famous Bone Church, decorated entirely in human skeletons, costs around £15 by train. Prague's Christmas markets in December and its Easter markets in spring are both worth timing a trip around. 7. Budapest, Hungary. Wizz Air flies Manchester to Budapest, and return fares under £45 are common if booked 2 months out for a midweek flight. A beer costs around £1.50, and a full meal costs £8 to £11. Visit the Fisherman's Bastion for free panoramic views over the Danube, walk across the Chain Bridge, and spend an evening at one of the city's famous thermal baths. Entry to Széchenyi baths costs around £14. Use the Budapest Go app for public transport. The money-saving trick is to visit a ruin bar, Budapest's famous bars built inside crumbling old buildings, for cheap drinks and a genuinely unique night out, rather than the pricier bars near the river. A weekend costs around £95 per person. A day trip to the riverside town of Szentendre, full of galleries and cafes, costs around £10 by suburban train. Sziget Festival in August is one of Europe's biggest music festivals and takes place right in the city, though it will significantly raise both flight and hotel prices that week. 8. Riga, Latvia. Ryanair and Wizz Air both connect Manchester to Riga, with return fares under £50 common outside the summer peak. A beer costs around £2, and a full meal costs £9 to £12. Walk through the Old Town, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Visit the Art Nouveau district, considered one of the finest collections of that architectural style anywhere in the world, and climb St. Peter's Church Tower for panoramic views over the city for around £6. Use the Mobily app to buy public transport tickets. A weekend costs around £90 per person. A day trip to the seaside town of Jurmala, with its long, sandy beach and wooden villas, costs around £3 by train. Riga's Christmas market in the Old Town Square is one of the least crowded and most charming in the Baltics. 9. Faro, Portugal. Ryanair, EasyJet, and Jet2 all fly Manchester to Faro, and while summer fares climb steeply, return tickets under £50 are common in the shoulder months of April, May, September, and October, which also happen to be the best weather months for the Algarve without the peak season heat. A beer costs around £2, and a full meal costs £10 to £15. Faro itself is a small, walkable old town, but the real draw is using it as a base to reach the Algarve coastline. Rent a car for around £25 a day, or use the local train line that runs along the coast for a few pounds a ticket to reach Lagos, Albufeira, and the dramatic cliffs at Ponta da Piedade. A weekend, including a day trip along the coast, costs around £110 per person. Faro's Old Town hosts a small but excellent seafood festival in July if your dates line up. 10. Dublin, Ireland. This is the shortest flight on the whole list, under an hour from Manchester, and Ryanair and Aer Lingus both compete hard on the route, meaning return fares under £30 appear regularly, especially for early morning or late evening midweek flights. Dublin itself is not the cheapest city on this list once you land. A pint of Guinness runs £5 to £7, and a pub meal costs £15 to £20, but the flight cost alone makes it worth including. Visit Trinity College to see the Book of Kells, walk through Temple Bar for the atmosphere, but drink elsewhere for better prices, and take the free tour of the National Museum of Ireland. Use the Free Now app for taxis rather than hailing one. Prices are shown up front. The real value here is day trips. A guided trip to the cliffs of Moher in Galway costs around £70, and a trip to the Wicklow Mountains and Glendalough costs around £35, both genuinely worth the short flight alone. A full weekend, given Dublin's higher prices, runs closer to £160 per person, making this the most expensive destination on the list once you land, but with the cheapest and shortest flight to get there. St. Patrick's Festival in mid-March is unmissable if you can handle the crowds and the doubled hotel prices that come with it. 11. Gdansk, Poland. Ryanair flies Manchester to Gdansk, and return fares under £40 are common if booked 6 weeks out for a midweek flight, with January, February, and November being the cheapest months to travel. Prices here run almost identical to Kraków. A beer costs around £2.50, and a full meal costs around £8. Walk through the colorful merchant houses on Długi Targ. Visit the European Solidarity Center to learn about the solidarity movement that began in this city's shipyards. Entry around £5, and take the short train out to the beach town of Sopot for an afternoon by the Baltic Sea. Use the Jack to Jade app here too. It covers most major Polish cities. A weekend costs around £90 per person. A day trip to the nearby Malbork Castle, the largest castle by land area anywhere in the world, costs around £15 including the train. 12. Valletta, Malta. Ryanair and EasyJet both connect Manchester to Malta, and while it runs slightly pricier than the Eastern European destinations on this list, return fares under £60 are common in the shoulder months of April, May, and October, which also give you the best weather without the peak summer heat and crowds. A beer costs around £3, and a full meal costs £12 to £16. Walk the fortified streets of Valletta itself. Take the ferry across the harbor to the three cities for a couple of pounds, and spend a day on the island of Gozo, reachable by a short additional ferry. Use the Talinja app for the island-wide bus network. A 7-day pass costs around £21 and covers almost everywhere you would want to go. A weekend costs around £130 per person, given the slightly higher cost of eating out. A day trip to the Blue Lagoon on the island of Camino costs around £20 by boat trip and is one of the most photographed spots in the Mediterranean. So that is 12 places, 12 completely different budgets, and 12 reasons your next cheap flight does not have to be to the same 3 Spanish cities everyone else is booking. Book midweek, book 6 to 8 weeks out where you can. Download the local transport app the moment you land, and you will stretch a weekend further than you think.